Sound check. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday, guys. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I'm coming to you live. It's about 6:35 Central Standard Time p.m. I know I tend to go a little bit early, but also, I want to go home. So I never hold myself to 7 o'clock, but I like being early, especially. So tonight I'm going to go over a really interesting topic, and I see a lot, within social media and things like that. Question I'm going to ask and answer is, can you really boost the immune system? Can you really boost it? So if you are watching right now, if you can hear me okay, please let me know if you can hear me okay. Say hello. Let me also know where you're watching from. I always like to see where people are watching from. So if you do in fact watch, please don't be a lurker. Just let me know where you're watching from. I love to see people watch from all across the globe as well. But I'm going to answer the question from the Wellness Way perspective. Can you really boost your immune system? Very, very important, because this also has to do with boosting other things as well. So I'll give you the answer on whether you can, in fact, boost the immune system. So really important. But I'm also going to explain to you why, and also what you can do in order to help get immune system sufficiency. Especially, I'm going to show you some pretty cool research and things like that. And yes, I will even talk about some COV, et cetera, research. So I don't know if that will get me banned on YouTube or not, but honestly, I don't care. Okay. So guys, our next inflammation talk, I know I've been talking about this, is coming up tomorrow. Yes, that's tomorrow, February 4th at 6 o'clock p.m. If you're from the Chicagoland area, please make sure that you register for that. If you want to work with us directly, please make sure that you reach out and you get registered for our inflammation approach. This is very, very important, because in order for you to be able to get better, one of the things that you really, really need to do is you need to know and start removing anything that's causing an inflammatory source. I had a conversation with a woman today. It's just some bizarre things started to happen. And I said, I think you really should check for mold. And on top of that, I had a gentleman who was really struggling with all kinds of things that were going on. And I asked him this question. I said, are you struggling with, is there mold in your house? His wife looks at him like, yeah, there is. And I'm like, well, at that point, it doesn't matter that you're taking 30 supplements. Nothing's going to work unless you first get yourself out of the source and you start working on metabolizing those mycotoxins the way they're supposed to. Just got his results back, and it's one of the highest mold concentrations on a test that I've ever seen. So, but if you're struggling with things like weight loss, low immune system response, yes, that's involved with a cancer. Infertility, yes, there's an inflammatory component to that. Thyroid issues, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, pay attention to that, because this has a lot to do with your immune response. Autoimmunity, pay attention to that, because I'm going to talk about that in your response to jibby jabbies and hormone imbalance. So this is very important, because there's all an inflammatory foundation underneath all of those. So all you have to do, guys, is get registered for tomorrow. Don't delay. And just go to our Linktree profile. You'll see that on all our socials, that Linktree. Click on that. That will take you to this page, and you'll see at the very top. You click on that, and that will allow you to be able to register for that inflammation event. So guys, if you do in fact register for it, we take your word for it that you're going to be there. So make sure that if you do register for it, that you're going to show up and you're going to show up on time. Okay. Please make sure that you show up on time. So if you're from that Chicagoland area and you want to work with us, make sure that you click that link and get registered. It's free to attend that event. Okay. All right. So let's talk about boosting the immune system. Now, I didn't have to look very hard because all I typed in a search term on Google is boosting the immune system. And these are just some of the pictures that showed up. And if you look at this, everybody's talking about, 11 great foods to boost your immune system, 13 ways to boost your immune system, foods to boost your immune system, boost your child's immune system. And then if you type in immune boosting foods, you get a list of 19,000 things, that people are trying to sell you as well. So, but you have to understand how the immune system works. You also have to understand too, is that nothing will go beyond normal physiological levels. They can't unless you are stimulating it in some very abnormal ways. And this has a lot to do with hormones and things like that. Okay. So here's some social media fallacies. And yes, I have seen this on social media. And in fact, I've even heard this from some dietitians. So, yes. So they said, hey, be careful on doing some things because you can boost your immune system into autoimmunity. And the answer is no, you cannot. You cannot boost your immune system into autoimmunity. In fact, if you understand what the immune system does, it doesn't attack healthy tissues. It will attack damaged tissue. It will attack, infected tissue. But the job of the immune system isn't to go after healthy tissue. And this is one of the biggest fallacies. Not only I've heard people say, but also if you start looking at, like the Mayo Clinic and start looking at the Cleveland Clinic, they start saying that autoimmunity is when your body attacks itself. There's a reason why the immune system is going after some things, and it has nothing to do. It's not going to attack healthy tissues. It's just not in your DNA code. Another fallacy that I see too is you can boost your immune system into a cytokine storm. This was particularly true a couple of years ago with the pandemic, because they would say, don't take this, herb, for example, echinacea, because it will induce a cytokine storm. And then I'm like, do you even know what a cytokine storm is? Because the reality is the cytokine storm doesn't exist as an official, thing that goes on. It's just not there. It's not even there in the literature. Although you'll see some people describe a hyperinflammatory response as a cytokine storm. You know why they say that? Because they don't like the immune system being insufficient, getting it to sufficiency when you have some kind of inflammatory trigger. Then the immune system starts to catch up with with lost time because it just hasn't been working the way that it's supposed to. And they just don't like the inflammatory response as that immune system gets to sufficiency and starts to catch back up. They just don't like the response. And that's why they call it a cytokine storm. So you cannot boost your immune system into autoimmunity. And here's the thing, guys. This is one of the things that just gets me, because when people say, oh, take X amount of vitamin D and it'll boost your immune system 400%. And then I look and I say, well, if that amount's going to boost it at 400%, then what if you took 4 times the amount? Is it going to boost the immune system 1600%? It's not. Okay. And so this is why the only thing that you can do is, if you're deficient, be able to get sufficiency of the immune system. Doesn't mean that you're never ever going to get sick again. Yes, you can still have some symptoms, and these can be some very healthy symptoms that the immune system is trying to overcome some kind of bacterial viral infection. And yes, this is the job of the immune system, but you can't boost yourself into autoimmunity, and you can't boost your immune system into some kind of cytokine storm. Anybody who's saying that, I will tell you this, they don't even understand the function of the immune system. Okay. Now, speaking of the immune system, here is kind of a simplistic graph of how the immune system works. And I have done a lot of things in regard to looking at the immune system. You can go on Rumble. If you go on Rumble, and you type in "make immune systems strong again," you will be able to see the whole thing about the immune system, how it works. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. I could easily have spent 6 hours doing that, but I don't want to spend 6 hours tonight. So I'm going to give you kind of a brief synopsis of the immune system. First thing that I'm going to tell you is immunity doesn't exist. You're like, what do you mean immunity doesn't exist? It doesn't exist. Let me give you an example. If you had the chicken pox, for example, and you got over the chicken pox, and then you let yourself get immune system compromised, and then, you break out with shingles, The thing is it's the virus that's always there. In fact, many times your immune system is doing a dance with old viral infections that stay in the body for long periods of time. And this is actually one of the things that shingles can do is that the immune system is actually trying to keep it under wraps. Unless you become immunocompromised, the virus has the ability to be able to grow and replicate. That's how someone actually gets shingles. In fact, when you have shingles, you have a severely compromised immune system, especially. So that's why you never say that there's such thing as immunity, because your immune system is always doing a battle trying to fight foreign invaders all of the time. But the cool thing with the immune system, when you look at it, is that most people don't even realize you have two divisions of your immune system. You have the innate immune system, in which you are born with, and these are things that don't require the body to be able to adapt, which is why they call it the adaptive immune system. So you got the innate immune system, and then you have what's called your innate immune system, your barriers. Guys, this is why having barrier integrity is so important. So you have the epithelium, which is around the gastrointestinal system, epithelium of the skin. So you have your skin is considered a barrier. The mucosa within the gastrointestinal system, especially within the colon, is considered a barrier as well. That's why if that mucosa degradates, gets very thin because of a high inflammatory environment, this is why it can cause a lot of inflammation, especially within the gastrointestinal system. Got digestive enzymes. Stomach pH, guys, is huge. So the stomach needs to be in a very acidic environment in order to kill off pathogens as you eat them, and also help you break down your protein. And then normal flora is also considered, or bacteria that reside within the gastrointestinal system is considered a barrier. And this is something that you actually can be born with, and it's always working. You also have the complement system, which is some liver proteins or proteins made by the liver that help with an inflammatory response. And then you have immune system cells that you are born with that know exactly how to function. So neutrophils are actually one of them. Those are neutrophils, the most abundant white blood cell. They're considered little eaters. This has a viral component, but primarily it's going after bacterial infections or any kind of damage to your tissues. Then you have other types of cells that are known as macrophages that are considered antigen presenting cells. So they're taking the antigen, or the foreign protein, they're presenting it to other cells so that it can make antibodies. But you also have something very important too, even when you were born, and they're called natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are huge because these are considered part of your innate immune system, and they have a huge viral component, especially. So natural killer cells are huge. And one of the things is that you get, as a baby, you get your natural killer cells from mom, which is actually why cord blood, umbilical cord blood is actually so important. Is why you want to leave it, pulsing for as long as possible, in order to get a lot of those stem cells that can differentiate into other types of immune system cells. But this is why cord blood can be so valuable, especially to a newborn baby. Then you got your adaptive immune system, which is more of a sniper specific response of your immune system, but this requires a little bit of training. This requires exposure. And this is going to involve your lymphocytes, which, pay attention, T cells, like your CD8 cells, which are your sniper specific cells. These are responsible for virally infected cells, tumor suppression. And then you have your CD4 cells, which are kind of like the general that's coordinating the adaptive immune system response. You got B cells that also make antibodies. And this is why this type of immune system, the adaptive immune system, has to be grown and has to be developed over time. And I'll explain to you why that's so important when it comes to the immune system, especially. Now, if you look at all of these different things, yes, there are certain things that you can do in order to not kill it off, to not affect it, and to also feed it, just to make sure that you're getting healthy immune system responses. And I go over that in a little bit more detail at the Make Immune System Strong Again webinar. You can find that on Rumble. YouTube took it down, and within 30 minutes took it down. It was a private link because they didn't like what I was talking about. So you can find it on Rumble, and that's free to watch that as well. But I go over this, and I go over the certain things that help to build those responses as well. I go over a lot of research behind it too. Now, can you test the immune system? Can you measure the immune system? And in fact, those specific cells that I just talked about? And the answer is yes. Although I will tell you this, if you're going and getting your yearly blood work and the doctor's just doing a CBC with a differential, it's not looking at these specific type of immune system cells, not at all. So if you can take your lymphocytes and then you can look at the different types of lymphocytes that you have. And so you can look at CD19, you can look at CD3, CD4, CD8, and you can look at your CD56, which is your natural killer cells. And so you can measure each one of those cells to see if they are deficient or not. And you will not get this on your yearly blood work. Okay. So this is a specific test. And honestly, I don't run it all that often unless people really, really want to see it. Only because the first thing that you have to do is you have to do usually some other testing in people. I remember some people, they came to me like, I want that test. And I'm like, well, you got some other things going on. So this is a good test to get after you've been working on some things for a while. But you look at this and you can see that this person actually has a high natural killer cell percentage. Yes, this person was very, very inflamed, had a lot of gastrointestinal system. That explains why there's a lot of a high prevalence, high percentage of natural killer cells, especially probably dealing with some kind of chronic viral infection too. So you can absolutely test this. I think this test is probably maybe 250, $300. Although I have seen people want to get it and it's run at the hospital and they charge $3,000 for it. So, but here's what I want to say about the immune system. And it's this: you cannot boost the immune system. People are talking about boosting the immune system. I'm like, you cannot boost the immune system. The only thing that you can do is you can provide sufficiency to the immune system. Okay. The reason why I say it is this, is that you cannot boost the immune system into abnormal physiological levels like testosterone. Okay. So this is true is anytime, guys, that you are doing something natural, yes, you can improve the immune system. But if you had a perfect lifestyle, you're feeding the immune system, you're not going to boost it into, 400% more cells than what would be physiologically normal. The same thing is with testosterone. Yes, I see a lot of men have very, very low testosterone due to poor lifestyle. You retest them again, and they get into good, normal, healthy physiological levels. And in fact, the only time that you can boost testosterone or any kind of hormone for that matter into abnormal physiological levels is to actually be taking it, like testosterone replacement therapy, or actually taking, steroids, or taking a thyroid medication, because those things are just manipulating. You're giving yourself hormone and you can have abnormal physiological levels by doing that. If you don't believe me, I've seen men come in, taking TRT, and they have been given enough testosterone to have abnormal physiological levels. And now that's going to be a bad day when you have abnormal physiological levels. In fact, I would say this is that if your body is actually streaming down testosterone production, and then you want to manipulate it with the hormone, it's going to be a really, really bad day, because there's a reason why the body said we need less testosterone. And you then start pumping yourself full of testosterone with not correcting the reason why the body started down regulate in the first place. This is why you can start to run into some problems as well. But you can't boost the immune system into abnormal physiological levels. You just can't do that. So the biggest thing that I'm going to tell you is this, is when it comes to the immune system and building healthy, good immune system responses, here's some of the things that you need to do. Number one, don't kill it. So don't kill off those cells, especially what kills off the cells? Lots of sugar. I'll show you in just a second. High amounts of stress, not getting enough sleep. Those are things that can actually start to kill off some of those white blood cells that are helping for you to be able to, help with viral infection, tumor suppression, and also bacterial infections as well. Number two, what you need to do is you need to exercise it. And this is why exposure is so important. You have to think about building an immune system response as exposing it as almost as if you are lifting weights in order to build muscle. So many people, they try to not expose themselves too much. I'm like, you're not building a healthy immune system response, especially. And then number three, you need to feed that immune system response. You need to feed the immune system response. This is why enough protein is so good. This is why feeding the bone marrow is so important. Things like astragalus in certain people. Feeding the thymus gland. This is why medicinal mushrooms are so important. And this is also why vitamin D will be so important, because it actually helps with people with the CD4 response, that's really responsible versus identifying foreign versus self, which is going to be very, very important when you talk about autoimmunity, especially. So don't kill it, exercise it with exposure, and then feed it in order to make sure, because even if you look at immune cells are derived from protein. You don't get enough protein, you're not giving the basic building blocks in order to be able to build healthy immune system cells. And yes, there's other things that can destroy the immune system, like mold and things like that. But that's for, another live, maybe a long time from now. Okay. So number one, don't kill it. Number one, don't kill off the immune system response. Here's an interesting slide. And this comes from a textbook called Cells of the Immune System. And this is a peer-reviewed textbook, just so you know. So yes, the experts said it was good. But here's what they say in one of the chapters. Neutrophil function, again, this has a viral component. This does have a bacterial component. Neutrophil function impairment is a host susceptibility factor to bacterial infection in diabetes. Here's what they say. Neutrophil response to bacterial infections in diabetes. This is why having elevated blood sugars or consuming a large amount of sugar in a short amount of time can be very detrimental to certain types of immune system cells, especially the neutrophils, and they turn over very quickly, but they don't have a very long shelf life, so they can die off pretty quickly too. Here's what they say. It is now generally accepted that high glucose concentrations impaired several functions of neutrophils beyond their migratory capacity, including phagocytosis and bacterial killing. Hyperglycemia hinders neutrophil activity. So hyperglycemia is high blood sugars impair the activity of neutrophils, or impairs their ability to be able to phagocytize or to eat other bacteria. One of the reasons why is because when you have a lot of sugar within the blood, sugar competes for vitamin C, and it will take in a lot of sugar within those neutrophils. And the only thing that it does is it just causes a lot of damage, a lot of oxidative damage to those neutrophils, and they'll die off pretty quickly. The other thing is too is glucose and vitamin C are very chemically similar. And so if you have a high sugar environment, chances are those cells won't be able to bring in vitamin C, which acts as an antioxidant in order to protect those cells. So all you're doing is you're decreasing the function of those cells responsible for bacterial infections, and you're causing them to die off a lot quicker. Now, what they go on to say is this: nevertheless, under glycemic control, or having, your blood sugar is under control, diabetic patients restored intracellular calcium levels and increased cellular ATP content in neutrophils, which consequently improved phagocytosis. So the first thing you need to do is not to kill off those cells that are responsible for infection. But we do it all the time. What was so interesting is while we were going through a couple of years ago a quote unquote pandemic, no one ever talked about what you need to do in order to improve your immune system. And you know who had the worst day with COVID? Those who had type 2 diabetes by far. And that's why they said, well, if you're older, you got blood sugar issues and things like that. But they never gave any kind of direction as far as what you could do in order to improve that. Now, if you guys notice, we have some people coming in and they're sick. They're sick with bacterial and viral infections and things like that. And you want to blame the virus, or you want to blame the bacteria. But in reality, just think about what you went through. You're in a low vitamin D month. And you also, basically, for a lot of people, they just slam themselves with all kinds of sugar during the holidays. The reason why I know that they slam themselves with all kinds of sugar during the holidays is because high amounts of sugar in one sitting actually will impair the function of the neutrophils to be able to ingest bacteria for several hours, which means you're at a party, you're getting, tons of cake, tons of sugar, tons of cookies. Someone happens to be sick, then during that time, you're much more likely to have massive exposure, and the body's just not able to fight off some of those pathogens, especially. Now, number one, don't kill it. Okay. So number one, don't kill it. Sugar has a huge role in it as well. But the other thing too has to do with your stress response. I talked about this last week when we talked about stress, why it's a killer. You can go back and watch that video. Please make sure that you do that, because I went over the same exact slide, but we need to revisit this again. Stress-related Epstein-Barr virus reactivation. Epstein-Barr virus remains latent in 90% of the patients following primary infection. Okay, so you get your primary infection, you have your exposure, the immune system has to work on it. Yes, you may have an inflammatory response, you're not going to feel very good. Then after that, boom, you get over it, but then it always can come back. So you can then have a secondary infection of Epstein-Barr virus. And when does it come back? It comes back under high amounts of stress. So what they say is this there is a significant difference between the rates of acute infection and reactivation among subjects with elevated cortisol, which has to do with stress, and epinephrine levels or glucocorticoids that suppress the immune system. So this is why when it talks about having a healthy immune system, this is why stress can absolutely devastate the immune system long term, including anything that's causing a high stress response. And if you want to know more about stress, go back and watch last week's video because I talked about it extensively and what it does. Stress will suppress the immune system. Here's why you know that. Because let's say, this is what I'm going to go over. Here's why you know that, okay? So don't kill it. Don't kill it with sugar. Don't kill it with stress. And a lot of times the medications that you're taking are in fact killing off the immune system. So here's an article that comes from about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and it said non-bivalent COV, et cetera, boosters fail to protect against Omicron in patients with autoimmune rheumatic disease. So basically what they're saying is this person has some form of autoimmunity. And usually what they're giving them some kind of steroid-based medication in order to suppress the immune system response. And it suppressed the immune system response, but it doesn't get to the reason why it's happening. But then what they found, because it was suppressing the immune system, is that these people were going and they were getting quote unquote boosted and nothing was happening. And the reason why is because even with a vaccine, you even need to you rely on your immune system to be able to make antibodies, even if it's temporary, because it is temporary. It doesn't last for very long. And it's how you stimulate the immune system. That's why you need to see the whole virus, and it needs to happen where the area of infection is supposed to take place, which is going to be for COVID, it's going to have to be around the lungs. And so this is why they also have to hyperstimulate the immune system with aluminum as an adjuvant directly into the body in order to hyperstimulate the immune system. And I always look at this and I say, gosh, they're probably really hoping that the immune system calms down when that happens. So, but they looked at people with autoimmune rheumatic disease, and they just found that, gosh, when they were under, the influence of these medications to suppress the immune system, is that there was nothing happening to those people. And that's why, later on, they had said, well, we actually need people to go off of these autoimmune medications in order to let the immune system start to pick back up again, in order to have some level of response. But they found it was just an absolute just nightmare. It wasn't doing anything. And that's because even in order to produce any kind of antibody response, you still need certain types of immune cells in order for that to happen. And this is a classic example of what I call the beatings will continue until morale improves. You can't kill it with medications, especially. Now, there's another thing that a lot of people go through, unfortunately, that really kills off the immune system, and it's chemotherapy. Chemotherapy will absolutely decimate the immune system. And this is why when you're undergoing chemotherapy, this is why they're pulling blood work, because they're looking and seeing, because it devastates the bone marrow where a lot of these cells are actually made. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a time and a place for chemotherapy in some people, as well. But if you look at this, chemotherapy long-term will devastate the immune system. And the problem is that after people, are given a cancer-free diagnosis, is that there's nothing done in order to help build up that immune system response, especially. Now, this comes from Stanford University. Eddie, I hope you're watching this, because he was going to argue with a Stanford University professor. And I said, watch my live, because I'm going to go over Stanford University research. So this came out of Stanford University, and here's what they said. Stanford's study ties milder COVID-19 symptoms to prior run-ins with other coronaviruses. Here's what's so simple, because this has to do with exposure. This is why exposure can be so good. In COVID-19 patients whose symptoms were mild, Stanford researchers found that they were more likely than sicker patients to have signs of prior infection by similar, less virulent coronaviruses. They said these immune cells are better equipped to mobilize quickly against SARS-CoV-2. The immune cells in question that are called killer T cells, CD8 cells, they roam through the blood and lymph, they park in tissues, they carry out stop and frisk operations on resident cells. Basically, what they're doing is they're going around to cells and seeing if they're virally infected. And if it's virally infected, you know what they do? They go in, inject their poison, and kill off that cell that has a virus. And that is sniper specific, which this is why having a healthy adaptive immune system is so important. This is why also having exposure is so important, because those cells are well equipped to go in and say, you're sick, I got to get rid of you. So the study published online July 1st in Science Immunology showed that killer T cells taken from the sickest COVID-19 patients exhibit fewer signs of having had previous run-ins with common cold-causing coronaviruses. So what this means is the less exposure that they had, the more likely they are to have a really, really bad day when it comes to any kind of COVID-19 virus or anything like that. So this is why they said previous exposure to other cold viruses are actually a good thing, because it helps the body to start to respond a lot quicker. Okay. Now, in regards to the immune system and the viruses, I wanted to go over this with you because this goes over the importance of having a healthy, strong immune system. So number 3, when I say feed the immune system, I'm going to give you a perfect example why. So this comes from HPV Cancers Alliance. You guys, have you ever heard of the HPV virus, human papillomavirus, that has been associated with cervical cancer? And here's the thing: a lot of viral, there is a viral component to cancer. There's no doubt about it. However, you know, if you have a sexually transmitted disease that's known as HPV, this is why, guys, they're giving the Gardasil vaccine not only to women but also to boys. I mean, and there's some devastating effects of actually doing that, because they think if I get HPV, then it's going to develop into cervical cancer. But here's what they actually found. This is what's really interesting. This should give you a lot of hope. So a new phase 2 clinical trial suggests that mushroom-derived AHCC, active hexose correlated compound, is effective at clearing persistent HPV infections. So this is some research, and I went over this a couple of years ago, now that they're developing in here. And they've actually found that certain compounds that come from mushrooms give the body an ability to be able to clear out certain viral infections. So this new phase 2 study is showing that AHCC is 58% effective at clearing persistent HPV infections, provides hope for those who are at high risk HPV. Now, here's what I want you to realize, because just because you have the virus doesn't mean it's some kind of death sentence. Although most people, listen to this, most people clear HPV infections naturally in 2 years if their immune system is strong. Not everyone has a strong immune system. I agree with that, but are we trying to figure out why people don't have a strong immune system that allows for the virus to absolutely just thrive and spread, you know, things like that? And this is why having a healthy immune system response is very, very good, because here's the thing: without a healthy immune system response, any virus can bowl you over. That's why it's always about strengthening the host, and not doing healthcare communism and making everybody suffer. So they said the mushroom-derived AHCC, active hexose correlated compound, is effective at clearing HPV infections. And the initial study showed a lot of promise in regards to that. But this is what we've been screaming about for so long: is yes, there are certain compounds that have antiviral properties to it. Okay. So when I say feed the immune system, this is why medicinal mushrooms, yes, and even vitamin D are very good. It can help you quite a bit. Okay. So what's the mushroom involved, you know, that has the active component, active hexose correlated compound? And it's the shiitake mushroom. Okay. So are there other mushrooms that can have a huge benefit with feeding the immune system? Yes. You guys ever heard of reishi mushrooms? Reishi mushrooms can actually feed the natural killer cell response. And also we'll give it to people, you know, who have certain hormone pathways, especially that are leading to a swollen prostate, high DHT, DHT, dihydrotestosterone, things like that. Chaga is also another medicinal mushroom. Turkey tail, cordyceps. And then if you look at vitamin D, I really think that your levels of vitamin D, because most people are very deficient in vitamin D. And there's a lot of reasons why you can be deficient in vitamin D. It has a lot to do with fat absorption, gallbladder function, or also if you're even taking enough vitamin D or stimulating it underneath the skin. but your levels really should be at 60 to 90 nanograms per milliliter. That's where your levels should be at. I get my tested once or twice a year, and it routinely stays at about 80 or so. So I want my levels of vitamin D to be as high as possible, especially. So this is why, during this time of year, no sun. If you're not supplementing with other forms of vitamin D, and yes, you can take vitamin D3 with K2, you can take it absolutely. But you can also, there's not a lot of foods that are high in vitamin D other than cod livers and things like that. But vitamin D is going to be very, very important, as are medicinal mushrooms. And I don't take all of these medicinal mushrooms, but I do take reishi. Um, I do take some chaga, and I do take some cordyceps every now and then as well. But then I also am measuring my immune system responses at least once, sometimes twice every single year. So you got to make sure that you're not killing off the immune system, with high amounts of sugar, high amounts of stress. But then you also need to feed the immune responses as much as possible. A lot of what these mushrooms work is they work on the thymus gland in order to provide a good environment for some of these T cells, killer T cells, especially CD8 cells, in order to grow and mature within the thymus gland, because they just aren't just spit out by the bone marrow. They can take a couple of months in order for them to grow and mature, as the thymus gland helps to facilitate that response. So these things, what they do is they just help to feed the thymus gland, give the thymus gland what it needs. And what's so interesting is, if you notice that, people say as you get older, the thymus gland atrophies, and I'm like, it's not supposed to. It atrophies because most people just crush their immune system, with a lot of different things, with stress, physical, mental, chemical, the standard American diet, being a type 2 diabetic, all those things can just destroy the immune system over time. But this is why, making the argument for exposure, this is why, guys, this is so, so important. You need exposure in order to build an immune system response. If this individual never exposed themselves to any kind of exercise, well, they're going to be kind of weak and kind of wimpy. This person gets enough exposure in order to help build up those muscles. And if you thought of your immune system, especially your adaptive immune system, as a muscle, then you're going to know, I do need a certain level of exposure. But here's what we're taught. And this happens to so many people, is that they get a high level of antibiotics, that I'm glad that we don't have to go back to the days prior to having antibiotics, but you see that everybody is getting antibiotics and not doing anything in order to protect themselves. And then you see moms send their kids to the grocery store. They go into the grocery store and they slather their child with Purell, trying to give them the most sterile environment, as possible. There's no exposure that's going on. And then we get a lack of vitamin D because we're afraid of the sun now, thinking that the sun causes skin cancer. And then we eat copious amounts of sugar, especially if you're eating the standard American diet. We get tons of vaccines, and then we wear a mask. And that's what we call healthcare today. And let me tell you something. I want to start asking the question is, how's that working out? How is that working out when you see autoimmunity on the rise, chronic degenerative illness on the rise? You see so many of those things online on the rise. We have to start asking the tough questions, okay? The last thing that I would do too is you need to, as far as your immune responses, yes, you do need to go and get stress under control. You really do need to get stress under control. Go back and watch the live video that I did last week on stress. But this is why adequate sleep is so important. And guys, this is why getting adjusted is so important. In fact, you look at research, and research has actually shown that yes, it improves the function of the immune system. In fact, they did some research at Life University with people who had HIV, and they're actually showing that it improved their CD4 and CD8 counts. And those are the things that they are measuring low in people who have active, HIV. So having a nerve system that has the least amount of stress as possible is very, very important. Getting adjusted is just one of the things, because the stress response is so tied into the nerve system, to your bone marrow, to the sympathetic nerve system. This is why, guys, this is so absolutely critical, especially during today's day and age, especially. So, in conclusion, you cannot boost the immune system. I still got some good things that I'm going to talk about, so make sure you don't leave. You cannot boost the immune system. You can only provide the immune system sufficiency. But here's what I'm going to say. Sufficiency is enough. Sufficiency is enough. You need a healthy immune system response that has a sufficient amount of white blood cells, sufficient amount of CD4, CD8 macrophages. You need a sufficient amount of those. You can't kill it off. You need it to be exposed. You need to feed it as much as possible. Sufficiency, guys, is enough. I'm going to explain to you why. This comes from the founder of chiropractic. His name is D.D. Palmer. And D.D. Palmer just started noticing things and started asking questions. People didn't like that he started asking the tough questions. And here's what he said. I desired to know why one person was ailing and his associate eating at the same table, working in the same shop, at the same bench was not. Why? What difference was there in two persons that caused one to have various diseases while his partner escaped? What was the difference? The difference was the adaptability of the host. And this is the whole chiropractic principle, is to make you stronger to your environment, to strengthen the body to the environment, and not try to weaken the environment to suit the weakened body. That's just not how it works. It's to make you stronger to be able to withstand any environment. And one of the amazing things is, I think this is one of the most profound questions that was ever asked, that he started asking the tough questions. You want to know something? When he started asking the tough questions, this is where the AMA started to come after him. And you'll notice that a lot of organizations will come after you when you start asking the tough questions that they don't have an answer for, especially. Now, this is why, if you look at history, anyone who started asking questions and wanted to start fighting the current level of thinking, they always came under violent opposition. And I'll give you a perfect example. Here's the final thought. Did you know 140, 150 years ago that physician hand washing prior to childbirth after working on cadavers was once considered quackery? Now, am I opposed to hand washing? No, because I know someone's going to say, oh, well, it's all about exposure. And I'm not like, well, I wouldn't go, I wouldn't go swimming in a whole pool of feces, because that's a lot of exposure. That's some abnormal exposure. But right around this time, the guy's name was Semmelweis. He started noticing something. He started noticing that a high amount of women were dying after childbirth, and it was about 15%. And then what he noticed is that when the midwives delivered the baby, they were washing their hands. And they noticed that the death after childbirth was down to about 1.5%. And there was a big difference between those two. Then they looked at the doctors who were delivering the babies. They were actually working on cadavers and then going straight in to deliver the baby and exposing them to a bunch of pathogenic bacteria around, within the vaginal canal, if you can believe that, a mucous membrane. So, and then he said, hey, you know what? Hey, doctors, maybe you should start washing your hands. And the doctors absolutely hated his clinical observation. And he hated the fact that he said, you need to start doing this differently. And they berated him. They castigated him. In fact, it was so bad he went into a mental asylum, because of his thought, and it was never accepted. And he died in a mental, in an insane asylum, basically, from being beaten to death. And his idea wasn't accepted until after his death. So he never got to see the fruits of his labor. But just remember this: when everyone says the science is settled, the thing is science never settled. And if you're saying that, then you're just not scientific at all. Physician hand washing prior to childbirth, after working on cadavers, that was considered quackery at that point. And I love when people say, they call me all different names, only because I'm just asking questions, providing a different perspective. And people don't like to have a different perspective and have to start thinking on their own. Here's another final thought. If you've been watching the RFK confirmation hearings, this is what's just absolutely incredible is be leery of the ones demonizing those that are willing to ask tough questions. Guys, RFK, the only thing that he's doing is he says, I want to know, and I want to ask the tough questions, and I want to start looking deeper. And you look at some of these just awful politicians, and if you watch that whole, some of the confirmation hearings, it's absolutely awful. So be leery of the ones demonizing those who are asking tough questions, because those who scream the loudest are usually the ones who are hiding the most. And in fact, I would hedge my bets that most of these politicians are getting a lot of pharmaceutical money as far as donations and things like that. I would hedge my bets that that's all happening. And they're afraid that the well's going to run dry when this person asks the question and we start answering it with an objective approach. Guys, one of the biggest things that I say, we say within the Wellness Way is if something's not working, let's start asking questions and start looking at it maybe from a different perspective. Semmelweis did that, and that's the reason why doctors don't work on cadavers and then stick their hands up your vagina to deliver. Right? It's one of the reasons why. Just remember this: great ideas often receive violent opposition from mediocre minds. Great ideas often receive violent opposition from mediocre minds. And if you can't change your perspective or you're unwilling to do that, then I would say this: you do have a pretty mediocre mind. Because remember this: everything that I talk about, my mind had to have been changed, and I had to be intellectually honest, especially. A lot of people don't want to be intellectually honest, and they certainly don't want to be faced with the tough questions and come from a different perspective. And that's why you come from a different perspective. If they can't answer that questions, they're not going to attack the argument. They're going to attack you. And a lot of people don't know this, but this is just within the last week. I probably had about 3 people who have threatened my life on social media, with death threats, hoping that I die a terrible death, and whatnot. And I would just say pretty mediocre minds when it comes to that. So guys, hopefully you understand the big approach behind the immune system. Can you boost the immune system? No, but you can get to sufficiency. And guys, sufficiency is enough. And this is why, guys, if you're from the Chicagoland area, please make sure that you go and you register for our next inflammation event. This is Tuesday, February 4th, which is tomorrow at 6:00 p.m. Make sure you get registered for that right now to see if we have available at that event. Guys, in order for you to be able to restore your health, you first need to figure out what are causing the inflammatory triggers. There's a lot of different things that are going on. This is one of the reasons why testing is important. So all you have to do is click on our Linktree profile, and you will see the first thing to pop up: inflammation event. Work with me in person. Currently, I'm not working remotely only because that filled up so quickly, but this is how to work with me on a one-on-one basis, especially in the office. And if you click on that, it'll take you 30 seconds to register for that event. My staff will reach out to you in order to confirm your attendance at that event, probably tomorrow. Okay. Now, on top of that too, and I talked about medicinal mushrooms, things like reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail, things like that. Vitamin D, if you're taking any kind of vitamin D, it needs to be vitamin D3 with K2. It just needs to be. And most people know to take that and now, but if you go and you click on that link tree, go to the Wellness Way store. And then if you go and you create an account, you log into it, and then use the code 5058 at checkout, and then you can start getting some things in order to help feed the immune system, especially. This is why medicinal mushrooms are just some of the things to help feed that immune system response. So again, can you boost the immune system? No, but you can get the immune system to sufficiency. And if you do things to get the immune system to sufficiency, it's never going to go beyond physiological levels. This is the same thing with boosting testosterone. This is the same thing with boosting a lot of things. The whole idea is to get to sufficiency, and sufficiency is really, really enough. So guys, if you like this video, please leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Please share this video with on your social media profile if you like this content, I should say. And always share with other people. I always appreciate when you share that. Just make sure that you're getting the word out, because people need to understand you can't boost the immune system, but a lot of people just don't have any idea what they do in order to take care of their immune system, like a lot of things as well. So guys, can you boost the immune system? No, you can't, but you can get to sufficiency, and sufficiency is going to be enough. So I'll be going live next week on Monday, and it'll probably be a question and answer. So if you do have any questions, leave a question here. I'll do my best to answer that. But that'll provide some questions prior to going into the Q&A so I can get it started as well. So next week I will be going live, so make sure you come back here, and we'll be doing a question and answer and try to answer your questions that you have in regards to health. And I'll do the best I can in order to do that. So guys, be well, be blessed. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I sincerely appreciate it. I'm humbled that you do watch it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And I'll catch you guys next week for